Alright, so catching up on GAC 3s, catching up on current events. Today is Wednesday, I think, right? Wednesday? Or Tuesday? Wednesday. Yesterday, the Dow hit 30,000 for the first time ever. Today, it is pulling back a tiny, tiny bit. Well, tiny bit comparatively. I want everyone to understand that Dow 30,000 really means nothing in terms of anything really technical. It is a purely emotional milestone. Um, it is a heavily weighted index, price weighted index, the Dow is. Um, and I was watching something yesterday that I think Home Depot is one of the most heavily weighted stocks in the Dow. So, what Home Depot does on a daily basis has more bearing on the Dow than any other singular company in the Dow 30. So, again, purely an emotional milestone and therefore purely emotional responses to that milestone. Um, of course, the president was more than happy to take credit for Dow 30,000, even though the last 600 or 700 points of the Dow's rise can be directly attributed to Janet Yellen being named as incoming Treasury Secretary for President elect Biden. I think if she's confirmed, I think that's going to be really, really good for the markets. She, historically, as Fed chair, was very dovish with regard to stimulus and monetary and fiscal policy and keeping rates low. Um, I mean, she was Fed chair under Obama. She was Fed chair right before Jerome Powell. So, if I think that the dovish duo of Yellen and Powell in their positions of Treasury Secretary and Fed Chair, respectively, I think that that could be really, really good for the markets longer term. Rates aren't going to get raised probably until 2023. So the only place to make money is going to be in the market. We had the same thing after the Great Recession for a good long while. The only place to make money was in the market. Um, you know, you can throw some money in a boring ATM like stock like Verizon, which I own, and get 4% dividend yield on that. Or you can throw that money into a bank CD and get maybe a tenth of 1%, or maybe a quarter of 1%. So, yeah, you're only going to make money in the markets for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 2 or 3 years at a minimum. Um, Most of the market will probably do well over that time frame. I still think that stock picking is generally the best way to make the most money. If you're not sure about what you're doing, if you don't have the conviction, if you're new, if you don't have the time, you can just buy an S&P ETF that has a good yield on it and just park it there. It's the same thing. You'll probably get more share price growth on an S&P ETF or another sort of index ETF um, than you would say Verizon, because I don't expect Verizon's share price to really move all that much at all over the next 2 or 3 years. It'll probably stay flat, but S&P over the next 2 or 3 years, given the economic environment and conditions. If you don't have the conviction to be a stock picker, then buy an S&P. Buy an S&P spider. Buy a spider. They generally have pretty decent yields, probably like 2% or something like that. Let's take a look, actually. I'll look it up while since I'm touting it. I do not own a Spider or an S&P ETF, but let's see. So symbol SPY is trading at $362 a share. Don't be alarmed by that. The dividend yield is 1.5%, so a little bit lower than I would have expected, but still. Um, a lot of people that work in finance, including but not limited to my niece's husband, who works for JP Morgan Chase, he, as a result of that, is not allowed to actively trade his own account because it's a conflict of interest, and any trades that he does have to go through half a dozen levels of approval in order for him to execute it. So he can never execute something the day he wants to. Usually ends up being a week later. So as a result of that, he just owns SPY. He owns SPY, a lot of SPY, has automatic dividend reinvestment, and he just lets it sit there and compound. If you have confidence and conviction that the markets overall are going to do well long term, which you should, because they will, then you can just do that if you don't have the conviction or confidence to be a stock picker. Just buy SPY, reinvest the dividend, leave it there. You might pay a little bit more in fees, but that's fine. It's better than not making any money or any interest in the bank, because you will not for a very, very long time. Yeah, I mean, the market's pulling back a little bit today. Dow's down about 0.5%. S&P's down, I think, about 1/3%. That's not that bad. That's really nothing in the grand scheme of things, considering where we were 7, 8 months ago, considering where we were even 2 months ago. Um, yeah, I mean, you have to have the confidence in the market that long term, it's going to be going up. If you don't, then you really don't belong in the market. I mean, you can try shorting stuff, but I don't. I certainly wouldn't short broadly. Pick specific targets like Nikola. Nikola's new CEO could not convince shareholders of their short, medium term viability. The stock is taking a big hit today. Probably also because the ousted CEO, Trevor Milton, whom I hate, loathe for that matter, can, if he wants to, can sell several million shares in the beginning of December, because his lockout period ends in the beginning of December. I can't remember exactly how many shares are locked up, but it is a lot. And Trevor Milton owns the majority of shares. He is, I think, no, I'm not sure if it's a majority, but I think, no, he doesn't have the majority, sorry. He has the single most shares of any one shareholder. That's what it is. He does not have a majority to himself, but he is the largest minority shareholder by a wide margin. So if he wants to be a dick, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is or wants to be, because he's a fucking dick, he could sell those shares and drop Nikola's price. I mean, he has that many shares that he can move the needle by himself. Nikola's down about a little over 10% today right now. It's down to $3.40 at the moment. And that's before this guy, Trevor Milton, can even sell anything. So I would be very, very wary of Nikola right now. Also, not for nothing, if you're looking in the EV sector, it's really a one-horse race at the moment. Tesla has been insane. I don't want to own Tesla because Elon Musk is certifiable, but that doesn't mean you're not going to make money. A lot of people have made a lot of money on Tesla. I just can't bring myself to own shares in a company wherein I do not trust the CEO. Um, Same reason why I could never own Wells Fargo for the longest time. I still won't own it now just because I think that there's still a significant black mark on their record. Although they have done better recently, I just still do not want to own it. But if you're looking at a dog that might have some upside, Wells Fargo might be in there. It's had a pretty good run up in the last week, but compared to its peers, I think it's still pretty cheap. Again, disclosure, I will never own Wells Fargo. I will keep to owning JP Morgan Chase because I love that CEO. Their CEO, Jamie Dimon, is and has been the best banker on Wall Street for quite some time. Wells Fargo's price to earnings multiple is actually 77 times, so that I don't actually like that number a whole lot, but it still might be something to look at. Yeah, oil somehow has done really, really well, which is surprising. Um, don't own coal. Do not own coal with the Biden presidency. What little is left of the coal industry is going to go the way of the dodo under a Biden administration. That much you can be sure of. I don't really know what oil and gas are going to do. A lot of analysts think that there will be more pressure under a Biden administration, which can be expected. But some analysts think that that means that no new exploration and production will happen, no more new drilling, digging, whatever. So all of the existing rigs and wells are going to be it, which then plays into supply and demand. If no one is allowed to start new rigs or new wells, then we're limited to the ones that we have. I mean, in theory, that argument makes sense. I just don't know how that's all going to play out. It depends on how heavy a push the Biden administration makes towards Green New Deal or something like that. I personally still think that natural gas liquids should be the bridge gap between crude and renewables because we have a glut of natural gas and natural gas liquids, and it's really cheap compared to crude especially. I mean, the futures for crude I think are back at $40 a barrel. Oil is right now $45.64. Nat gas is $2.79. So, if we use natural gas as a bridge gap between crude oil and renewables, it's a lot cheaper. It's not quite as dirty, and we have plenty of it in the continental United States and, well, North America overall. And I mean, obviously, that skill set in terms of the workforce easily transfers over. A good friend of mine sent me an article about geothermal energy, wherein you harness the heat and warmth of the Earth's crust, and which is awesome because that's renewable. It's a little bit hard to do because you can only do it basically in, well, all of the states in mountain time zone in the continental United States. Apparently it works better on a smaller scale, so doing it on a larger scale might be a little bit more difficult. But apparently the skill sets from oil and gas drilling transfer over to that rather easily. So that could also be a very good bridge gap or even transition from oil to renewables. Basically with geothermal, you're finding a geothermal deposit like a volcano or hot springs, which is why we're talking about only limited to mountain time zones. Yosemite, just as an example, I wouldn't drill or dig in Yosemite, I'm just saying. And you harness the heat and warmth and you bring it up with water. So you're drilling and you're pulling up hot water steam water, um, and then putting it back into the earth, and then you just recycle it. That is obviously an oversimplified version of it, but you're more than welcome to Google it and look it up. But the skill set actually does transfer over rather seamlessly from oil and gas drilling to geothermal drilling. Obviously, a lot cleaner. Obviously, we're not nearly as worried about greenhouse gases and emissions and all that. I'm not saying you're going to be able to power cars and trucks that way, because I mean, it generates electricity, obviously. Um, it might not work, but certainly for heating buildings, houses, homes, maybe even small towns or cities, even, certainly worth looking into. The tech is just very behind and needs to be developed. I think theoretically that could be much more reliable than solar, because solar, you obviously are depending on the sun. And if it's, overcast, cloudy, and whatever for a prolonged period of time, you are not harnessing as much of that solar energy as you might otherwise, whereas geothermal is constant. It's too bad that we probably wouldn't be able to create geothermal plants on the island chain of Hawaii, because I feel like that would be awesome. Imagine harnessing Mount Kilauea, which is an active volcano. Imagine harnessing Mount Kilauea's volcanic activity and converting that into electricity. Um, that would be one hell of a life hack. But yeah, all this to say, I don't exactly know what is going to happen with oil and gas under a Biden administration. Uh, I don't know if the capping of new drilling and digging is going to push the price of oil much, much higher. It might. It very well might. Especially because people, once things go back to normal-ish, people are still going to be a little bit scared to take mass transit, certainly before they get a vaccine. So everyone's going to try to drive themselves as much as they can. Um, yeah, I don't know. But I will say that oil and gas is the smallest um, portion of my portfolio right now. I think I have about 5% asset allocation into oil and gas. Um, Way back in the day when oil and gas was hot and pipeline MLPs were hot, I had probably closer to 15% allocation in them, because they were all safely yielding 4 or 5%. Now, a lot of these oil companies, their yields are, with reason, under some serious scrutiny, because they aren't making money. How are they paying their dividend yields? So proceed with caution if you look to invest in the energy sector. If you are a betting person or a gambling person, the sector is still very, very low compared to pre-COVID, but invest at your own risk. There's a reason why I lowered my exposure to energy and oil and gas significantly over the last 6 months. Um, yeah, I mean, the market has been really good. A lot of things are very, very expensive, perhaps too expensive. But then again, like I said before in the beginning, the outlook for the future, or at least the economic environment, looks extremely conducive to equities. Um, Extremely conducive to equities. I mean, a lot of people are wondering if the dovish duo of Yellen and Powell will push more quantitative easing, more fiscal stimulus, relief packages, like I said. And if they do, the markets are going to fly, because they're just going to print more money. Free money for everyone that has money in the market. Which is good and bad. Yeah, you're making a lot of money in the market, but at the cost of our country's deficit. Our deficit is almost definitely going to balloon even further than where it currently stands. So that is eventually there's going to be a reckoning for that, and it may end up being just a bridge too far for tax increases to even alleviate, at least in any significant way. So it's something to certainly be wary of. Maybe even as soon as 10 years from now. Um, we certainly are going to have to figure out a way to pay down some of that debt. I wouldn't be surprised if Warren Buffett, God forbid, when he passes, donates a significant amount of his fortune to pay down the deficit. Because Warren Buffett, although many people may not like him, they may think he's washed up, comparative has been. A lot of people don't like him simply because he's a Democrat. Warren Buffett pays money to pay down the country's deficit every single year. Google it. He does it every single year. He pays a lot of money to try and take a tiny little sliver out of our deficit every year. There are actually a half a dozen members of Congress that join him in doing so, obviously on a much smaller scale, but every year Warren Buffett pays money to pay down our deficit. So we certainly could use more billionaires like him that are willing to foot the bill for the rest of us. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Bill Gates joined him in that, or Bill and Melinda Gates joined him in doing that. I'm not positive if they do or do not, but it would not surprise me. But it's going to take more than that. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take a seriously concerted effort um, in order to deal with our crippling national debt at some point or another. I genuinely don't know how we do it, but it's certainly going to take a lot more than, what will be comparatively token tax increases. But we have to get to that point, right? We have to survive the now to get to the later. And by survive, I mean literally and figuratively. We have to survive fiscally, monetarily, but we also have to survive physically. So it's a precarious situation, to be sure. Let's see. All right. Until next time. Oh no, I still have this whole other sliver here. Okay. We'll keep going for a little bit longer. It's kind of like Lend-Lease, at least the mindset of it is kind of like FDR's Lend-Lease, the Second World War. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't argue over how much you're going to charge him to borrow your hose or use up your water. Oh, I'm actually out of time on this one. All right, next time.